Now, to pick up where I was saying that one of the problems with the 3 or 4 year electoral cycles in Australia and other Western countries is that governments don't think much beyond the next election. They think, well, what have I got to do to get re-elected? What have we got to do to stay in power? And that means sometimes that perhaps important decisions about the nation's future don't get discussed, don't get talked about, because they're long term and people don't want to think about the long term. They just want to think about what's the short term, what's the benefit to me now. Now, if we were to contrast that with the Chinese system, remember, I'm not here to spruik their politics or tell you how good a country they are, because I've never been there and I don't know anything about the country. But let's think about this. The Chinese, as I said, they have, I think, what's called the People's Consultative Committee or something like that, which is a quasi-parliament that meets about once every 5 years and supposedly makes a lot of decisions about where the country's going to go for the next period of time. And in between time, they don't have to be bothered with pesky things like elections. They don't have to be bothered with saying, well, what are the voters thinking at the moment? What are the opinion polls telling us about our policies and so on? Because those things don't matter. They don't matter because Xi Jinping, who is the current Premier of China, or head of the country, I'm not sure what his official title is, but he's the head of the country. He's been declared the head of the country for life. So the only way he'll lose that job, in theory, is when he drops dead. So he hasn't got the issue of saying, well, every 3 or 4 years I've got to go through an election campaign, I've got to convince people to vote for me and all that sort of stuff. So the benefit of that to him, perhaps, the benefit perhaps to the Chinese, and I'm not, again, extolling the virtues or saying we should do the same thing, but I'm not saying that by any means. I'm just pointing out this is how things work in China. So when they think about the future of their country and when they think about what they want the country to be like in 10 or 15 years, they just say, this is what it's going to be, this is what we want to happen, this is how we want the country to be or what we want things to be like in 10 or 15 years, and they just go about making it happen by issuing orders and giving instructions and getting things done. Now, that so-called planned economy or so on doesn't suit us because we're used to having choices. We're used to making decisions for ourselves and saying, well, I don't want someone to tell me that. I don't want someone telling me, making decisions like that for me. I want to be able to do that for myself. I don't want a country where the leader is the leader for life. I want to be able to choose the leader that I want. I want to be able to say to the existing leader at any point, well, you're not doing a very good job and I want to get rid of you. But in the case, as I say, in the case of China, they took a decision 15, 20 years ago. Somebody said, listen, we can make cars here. We can make good cars and we can make electric cars. And so why do we want to make electric cars? Well, because we don't want to be dependent on foreign oil. And because if we make electric cars and we make them properly, no one else will make them as well as we do. We'll become the leader in that field. There'll be companies here making it, profits will stay here, jobs will be created, all that sort of stuff. So the point I'm trying to make here about China is that we're being at the moment whipped into some sort of frenzy about the Chinese being our enemy, that we should be afraid of, that they're out there plotting to take us over. And I'm not saying they are doing that or they aren't. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea because I've never been there and I don't know anything about the decision making either for the military or the non-military people in China. But they've reached a position that they are in as either potentially the second biggest economy in the world because we help them to do that. We help them by saying, we don't want to make stuff in Australia anymore. We don't want to make stuff in the West anymore. We don't want to have any dirty industries. We don't want to have to deal with pesky people like unions. We don't want to have to worry about environmental laws, all that sort of stuff. So we'll send our manufacturing to China. And we, the consumers, thought this is a great idea because we get cheap goods. Um, we get them in lots of them, so there's competition, which helps drive down the price and so on. Um, and the Chinese rubbed their hands through glee and said, jobs are being created, uh, the economy's growing, people are being lifted out of poverty, so on and so forth. At some point in that process, the Chinese decided, well, we're not just going to be the cheap, shoddy goods manufacturer anymore. We're going to make things. We're going to make them. Chinese companies are going to make them, and they're going to make them well. They're going to make good stuff. We're going to invest in research and development and education and all those sort of things. And whether we want to admit it or not, the fact is that Chinese companies are at the cutting edge of research and development in many areas, especially to do with renewable energy, but also to do with electronics and other areas as well. But I'll say again, I have not been to China. I have never been to a Chinese factory. So I don't know anything about these things other than what I see and read from other people who talk about these matters and who are apparently qualified to comment on them. So we help them on the way by opening factories there and encouraging companies to move there. We did that because they had lots of labour and their labour was cheap. But at some point the Chinese said, well, we're not just going to make shoes for Adidas, or we're not just going to make computers for Apple or whoever. We're going to make things for ourselves, and the companies that make them are going to be Chinese companies, and the money and the profits are going to stay here. Now, in Australia in particular, we have what I would call a symbiotic relationship with China. That is, we have stuff that they want. Iron ore, coal, wine, lobsters, other stuff like that. We have products with raw materials or finished goods like wines and so on that they want. And they want to buy those things, and they want to buy them in a lot of them. And we're happy to sell them those things. They also have stuff that we want. As I said, all the white goods that are in your house, or most of the electronics that are in your house, and increasingly the car that's in your garage. If not the car itself, then certainly a large portion of the components for it are made in factories in China, either by a Chinese company or by some other company that's doing so in China. So we have a win-win situation. They have stuff, they want to make stuff, they need to buy raw materials from us. We want to buy stuff that they make, so we buy it from them. We buy it at affordable prices, and we buy it in large numbers because there's plenty of it. And that seems to me to be, in modern economics at least, a win-win situation. And I can't think of any reason why we would want to jeopardise that with decisions that might not be in our best interest, and possibly not in their best interest, but certainly might not be in our best interest. And I can't think of any reason why the Chinese would want to jeopardise that situation either. If we have long-term contracts to say we're going to sell you coal and iron ore and whatever else it is that we sell to you, and they've got a guarantee of supply, why would they at any point be thinking, well, we'll just go down there and take over the country and take the stuff from them anyway? We'll take it, then we won't have to buy it from them, we'll just own it anyway. That seems to be somewhat of a far-fetched, like I said, I'm somewhat of a fanciful situation. I'm not in a position to make commentary about strategic issues like that, or defence issues and national security. So maybe I'm way off the beat there. All right, well, that's what I wanted to say about China. And like I said at the beginning, I've never been there. I don't have any interest in any companies that work there and operate there. I have Chinese stuff in my house like everybody else does. If you have an opinion about what I say, what I've said, then leave it in the comment section as you normally do. And when I become aware of it, I will respond in an appropriate manner. Thanks for watching. I'll keep the camera running for a little while.